Every single day, I keep hearing on the establishment media, on social media, my friends complaining about how the system is corrupt. I tell them we can fix the system. They say nothing can be done. You need a lot of money. Without money, you cannot do anything. Their pessimism is like a disease. I am telling you that, on the contrary, any movement that requires any amount of money will never change anything. The only movement that will change everything that needs to be changed in our corrupt system is a movement that will not require a penny. A movement that will spread like wildfire because of the word of mouth. Allow me to explain. All these people criticizing each other on social media, on establishment media, accusing each other, complaining how their voice is oppressed. I can also go on for days telling you how they themselves are no less corrupt and how my voice is oppressed. For the last 25 years, I've been systematically banned from every single political forum on cyberspace. And at the same time, watching imposters like Trump, who were systematically shoved down our throats, I couldn't even see my own friends' posts on Facebook back in 2015-16 because of all his advertisements. While these supposedly outsiders were allowed to showcase on the establishment media and act like their voice is oppressed. Anyone can claim that their voice is oppressed. But you can identify this movement's legitimacy by its two key objectives. Number one, introduce against vote option in all elections. Number two, restore freedom of speech by launching an official public forum where we are only allowed to have one identity and no one can be banned for any reason. I will get to all the details in a few minutes, but first, let me say this. True, I may seem like a joker because I have no audience. You can notice my 0 views. But it's only because, as I said, I've been systematically banned from every single political forum on cyberspace for the last quarter of a century. And of course, every time I got banned, I lost all my online friends and followers. It's back to 0. So do not worry about 0 views or lack of views for this video. Do not be a sheep. This movement is still by far the most favorite with the society as a whole. Society as a whole is not quite as autistic as what's allowed to dominate cyberspace on the establishment media. Vast majority understands that we must unite not behind some televised celebrity, making some empty divisive promises which can only unite a portion of society. Whether it's a free wall paid for by Mexico, free housing for people who cannot build houses themselves, to help the black community, to save the white Christmas, whatever, but only to fix our broken election system and restore freedom of speech. That's it. Only then will the people be able to elect true representatives in sweeping elections who will be able to keep their campaign promises instead of blaming each other for their failures. Do not worry about ignorance of society. All you need to be concerned about is what is needed from you. Just listen. The name I chose, newworldgovernment.net, may sound extremely uncool, extremely unpatriotic. Nothing like a Mexico first or a bigly change we can believe in. But I'm telling you that what is really uncool and unpatriotic is what is happening in Ukraine today, and what's been happening all over the world throughout history with these military conflicts, devastating nation after nation, and these nationalist patriots, these wannabe heroes, being absolutely unable to do anything about it. Not one of them. Donald Trump had 4 years to drain the swamp in America. But instead, he was too busy tweeting and eating chocolate cake while ordering strikes on Syria, as he himself put it. Now, imagine if America was in decline and some superpower that wanted to completely destroy us would start backing something like Black Lives Matter, with weapons and everything, would start to encourage them to fight for their own nation within America. Do not be cowards, to liberate themselves once and for all from the offspring of the former slave owners. After all, they have their own culture, their own language, they speak Ebonics, not some English. If you think whites would easily win, I'm telling you to look at Ukraine. I was in Ukraine in 1985. It was absolutely unimaginable that something like this could be happening there. And we can all be heartbroken about it. But true patriotism is being able to unite the people without borders. Because today, no matter how tall of a wall you're going to build, we have airplanes and corrupt politicians to issue visas to the criminals who can fly over these borders, fly over these walls. True patriotism is newworldgovernment.net. Everything else is a joke, just like Donald Trump, who, by the way, was introduced on all establishment media as a presidential candidate a day before he himself even announced that he's running for president, before he himself could even fill a toilet of supporters. Despite being featured in some of the top Hollywood movies for the last 30 years. Forget the ignorance of the masses. It's all about whether you are a sheep or not. Look at reality. Establishments made members, or outsiders as they call themselves, like Donald Trump, will be allowed to go on these giant networks and ask the entire nation, how could Joe Biden have won elections when he couldn't even fill a toilet of supporters? And he will look like such a genius for asking that. But I will ask one or two people, if I can reach out to that many. And my girlfriend doesn't count. If Trump was such a genius, well, why didn't he drain the swamp? He was president. He was a leader for 4 years. If he would have drained the swamp like he promised, then we wouldn't have this confused swamp creature crawling around White House. And I will answer that question, because Trump cannot. Because Trump himself and his idiotic ideas were not nearly as popular as the establishment media which introduced him made him out to be. Just because he filled arenas of supporters does not mean he had majority of nation behind him. There are many artists who fill stadiums of supporters, but even 60,000 fans in a stadium in a city of 6 million is still only 1% of population of that city. And if you do not have support of the majority, your hands are kind of tied when it comes to draining the swamp. So I understand Donald Trump. That is precisely why the swamp was not afraid to introduce him as a presidential candidate on CNN and Fox News and all these other giant establishment media networks a day before he himself announced that he's running for president. To allow him to showcase, to tell us about how Clintons are crooked. They might as well have had someone like George Soros or Bill Gates tell us about how Clintons are crooked and how after years of dealing with them, doing business with them, he finally realized how evil liberals are and now wants to save America from them. Needs to get elected. And so what if Trump is allowed to play president again in 2024? So in 2028 they're just going to have another liberal in their seesaw circus. newworldgovernment.net, on the other hand, with the two objectives I'll be addressing in detail, will have majority of nation behind us. That is precisely why the establishment will not allow us to run any advertisements, even if we would have money, will not allow us to showcase on the establishment media, and will ban this video, will find something hateful about this message of peace once it reaches a certain level of recognition. So this is what you must do. First of all, understand that there's nothing incriminating, nothing hateful about this movement. Establishment, which controls the media, are a bunch of total cowards. They're not fighters. They can only hide behind hypocrisy. That's the only way they can look tough, by pretending to be something that they're not. So have courage to download this video before they delete it, so that if they delete it, you can at least continue sharing it with your friends. And if you do not have enough courage to scribble newworldgovernment.net and place it as a yard sign or a bumper sticker, you can also put, and I'm not trying to be sarcastic here, not trying to be funny at all, just listen. You can also put newworldgovernment.net sucks, newworldgovernment.net is evil, or down with newworldgovernment.net. It will be just as effective, maybe even more effective to get the message out if your neighbors happen to think that you're stupid. As I documented earlier, this is exactly how the establishment, understanding that it is not trusted by society, keeps introducing and promoting its own trusted members. Pro or against, it really doesn't matter. You can put Donald Duck or Mr. Bean, 2024. As long as you also put next to it newworldgovernment.net, sucks, clearly visible. The idea is to unite outside cyberspace, which they can manipulate. When these mafia roaches will start seeing our yard signs and bumper stickers popping up all over the place, their entire political welfare cult will either pretend that they were on our side all along or go silent. Unlike in cyberspace, which they can manipulate, they will not be able to do absolutely anything about it because they are not tough. They are not fighters, and they do not control military. They manipulate military. Big difference. And their mercenaries, or the top generals, if elites will try to give them orders to interfere, to fight against our justified universal cause, instead of some usual idiotic divisive drivel which they themselves often initiate to control opposition, these mercenaries will instead turn on them. And they do not have aliens backing them. They will not be able to nuke the world and go live in their underground tunnels like they show us in their movies. One of their hidden scare tactics. In their movies, in cyberspace, they're invincible. And we do not have to fear poor people in other nations gaining the same freedoms, or criminals from other nations coming here to steal from us. All we have to do to prevent that is stop giving away free handouts. What we do need to be concerned with is criminals in power, harboring criminals in society, which they keep doing all over the world, just so they can have backing and turn us against each other when they are threatened with some nationalist movement. For example, with this conflict in Ukraine, they can blame each other all they want, but after they toppled the so-called democratically or undemocratically elected Russian puppet, they had 8 years to install a real democracy, if that's what they wanted. But instead, they installed some new puppet regime that was friendly to them, that was making payments to Vice President Joe Biden's son Hunter Biden, among other members of the mafia. What more needs to be said? And so to those who supported America's efforts to liberate Afghanistan, what can they tell us that after decades of effort, trillions of dollars spent, all the lives lost, as soon as American troops left, their government crumbled? So now they will try to tell us, like I know my mother was trying to tell me, well, the people there are very ignorant, they still have caveman mentality there. No, they should instead ask themselves how would they like it if Russians or Chinese would decide to bring them their freedom. They wouldn't like it very much. newworldgovernment.net, on the other hand, will be able to eliminate crime and poverty in the entire world because it will have people's backing and the authority to do so. Any so-called national coalitions, state coalitions, city, block, household, or toilet coalitions, any so-called independent governments, who, by the way, always seem desperately dependent for handouts from international bankers in order to exist. Let them try to object to our cause, the 2 objectives this movement stands for. They will only bury themselves. They can only look good in front of their followers by comparing themselves with other players within their global political idiot circus. Next to each other, pointing out each other's flaws and hypocrisy in between handshakes and hugs, they can look good. But next to what this movement stands for, they cannot look good. It ruins the entire good cop, bad cop circus. Us, they can only ignore, keep blocking, and pretend that we do not exist. So do not ignore this. Here is how we rebel against the system which preys on humanity's division. Number 1, introduce against vote option in all elections. Our main stated objective. We know that societies where people can select their own representatives have been more successful than dictatorships. However, in our so-called republics or democracies around the world, especially with the merging of cyberspace, while people who are fooled by politicians have a voice in elections, they can vote for them. People who are not fooled by politicians do not have any voice. They cannot vote against them. All the existing dictatorships or establishments need to do to remain in power, if they feel they wore out their welcome, is introduce their own trusted members as opposition and accuse any real opposition that's becoming too successful of being extremist or whatever, as an excuse to silence them on the media, which of course they claim they do not control. With against vote option implemented, however, these existing oligarchies will no longer be able to rig our elections, because it will give a voice to all the people who do not trust any candidates that are being artificially shoved onto society with the use of money and media propaganda. Their money and media propaganda, positive or negative, will no longer have any effect on election outcome, because if a candidate that was allowed to showcase all over television, perhaps acting like he's grassroots, like television doesn't like him, all over social media with the sponsored ads, acting like an outsider, receives, for example, let's say 50 million for votes from people to whom he may have promised, whether it's more money to military families, to the police, the people with guns, or people who give up guns, $1,000 a month for everyone, a free chocolate cake, whatever, but also gets 100 million against votes from people who do not wish to give out any such free handouts. Then, candidates who are truly independent, if they have something better to offer, even if they do not have a penny to their name, will be able to win. Candidates who may represent society which is for the most part not in the mood to give money to politicians to make political contributions will be able to win. Candidates who may not appeal to establishment and their media due to their lack of controversy and idiocy, and therefore lack of opportunity for these hypocrites in the media to look good themselves by criticizing them and actually doing them a favor, making them famous that way. But candidates who, due to some good ideas or good leadership, with or without any assistance of the establishment media publicity, manage to get, for example, maybe just 1 million for votes if establishment media happens to be in the hands of hypocrites, but even less or the least against votes, since they did not have to promise free this, free that, or some other stupid things to appeal to a portion of society while getting mass exposure with this, what can be best described as a phishing scam. Instead of these televised celebrities, genuine candidates will still mathematically win and will start to systematically win elections. Whenever there's primaries, beginning of elections, any hypocrites who manage to garnish a portion of 4 votes with something idiotic, like by promising people whether it's easy, excellent paying jobs where they can sit on their asses all day, to bomb those suckers and give you cheap oil, or take their oil, or free health massages with happy endings like Hillary Clinton's sidekick Madonna promised. If they get even more against votes, it immediately becomes clear that they can go home with their promises. They're not wanted as public servants. And if they manage to sneak through into the next round, because maybe locally not enough people were paying attention, they will only embarrass themselves later, in the main elections, where people will be paying attention, as will the media outlets who chose to introduce them and stay obsessed with them. This will change absolutely everything in our lives, in our world. It will get rid of entire political mafia like a cockroach infestation. It will allow people in the government who want to serve their communities rather than special interests do their jobs. Because one big league candidate, no matter how much he loves America first or his nation first, as we witnessed over and over again, in the end cannot change absolutely anything, other than help some new genius like Joe Biden win their popularity contests, by hook or by crook. And if Donald Trump's side is claiming that the media lied about how many votes Joe Biden got, as I mentioned earlier, we should allow possibility that both sides lied, that they all constantly lie and are allowed to get away lying just so their entire unpopular political circus looks more legitimate than it actually is. Because I would conduct multiple choice polls on political forums before I would get banned, which is I know exactly why I would get banned. And I know that's exactly why YouTube and Facebook no longer even display dislikes, downvotes. I would conduct these polls where I would select a few of the most popular political celebrities at the time on their news media, their top presidential candidates such as John McCain, Herman Cain, Macron, Obama, Bush, Clinton, whatever. Whoever was the most popular at the time according to the news media. And I would have for as well as against vote option for each one. It would be multiple choice poll. And every single time, all of these top contenders, according to the news media, would end up way in the negative. 70, 80, 90% or more would always vote against them, which reveals a very serious glitch in their so-called republic or democracy, whatever they want to call it, that not just one candidate to one side, but that the entire news media, even from other parts of the world, for whatever reason, is being systematically obsessed with candidates that majority of Americans do not even want to see. If we can use our own personal logic, rather than accepting demented reality of the news media, this is a deception of epic proportions. It demonstrates that if the people are ignorant, they are not ignorant by choice. An against vote option will turn it all around. Number 2, our second main stated objective, just as important, restore freedom of speech. Launch an official public forum. Giant networks like CNN and Fox News taking turns telling us how evil the president is not freedom of speech. Friends telling to each other how corrupt the system is not freedom of speech. We used to do that in Soviet Union. And with all due respect to my American friends, I love my life in America, but I would have never been excited to come to the United States in 1987 to invest my life here, learn the language and all, if I would have knew that I would keep getting banned from all political forums for expressing my political ideas. I'd have much rather been eager to immigrate to a place like Iraq, Libya, or Syria. They were nice countries back then. In our modern world, in the age of cyberspace, blocking a person from social media is equivalent to murdering him, to cutting out his tongue. Some people live so they can talk. How can it be that in the capital of freedom of speech, in the United States, social media owners, who first of all owe their very existence to taxpayer-funded public sector, putting up satellites in the sky, inventing the internet, when these social media geniuses who usurp this technology by bribing politicians can keep banning people left and right, even the Twitter-in-chief, the supposedly elected leader of a nation, and remain relevant. Now, as I believe I documented clearly a few minutes ago, banning Trump at the end of the 4-year season was just part of the circus act, to give other, even bigger news outlets an excuse to announce it, to say, oh, look, he's the one that's oppressed, he must be an outsider, to make him more appealing to millions of people like myself who actually have been silenced on cyberspace, to possibly prepare him for 2024. You can call it my opinion. Anyone can claim that their voice is oppressed, but it shouldn't have to be a guessing game whose voice is really oppressed. To end this hypocrisy, our elected representatives must launch an official public forum which is not controlled by any private corporations nor some imbecile and cannot ban people for any reason. A forum which will exist indefinitely, allowing people to stay connected, to organize politically without interruption, without establishment media manipulation. To combat hate groups from organizing on these forums. And I already addressed hate mongering earlier. Naturally, people are not interested in hate. And what may seem like hate speech to some is often simple truth about someone else to others. It's for people to decide. To combat hate groups from organizing on these forums, individuals will be allowed to set their own settings, what we want to see, what we do not want to see, what kind of language, who, if anyone, we ourselves want to block, and prevent idiots from setting up multiple accounts to prevent spamming. To prevent these pushy salespeople, that's what these hate mongers are, they're pushy salespeople. To prevent these pushy salespeople from bothering us from under different identities, so that if we block them, they and any hate groups or scams they create no longer show up on our feed, like these annoying politicians. That's it. One individual, one account. No multiple passports, no multiple IDs, no multiple accounts. Those who need to use multiple accounts or secret names or be censored can continue using private forums. According to CNN, Donald Trump will soon launch such a forum. Watch out! Maybe already has. Who cares? But when our elected representatives will launch such an official public forum, and not some intentionally lame, functioning at the same speed as is given to these private corporations, a forum where our friends' posts cannot just be deleted or subdivided with some idiotic degrading spamming, or advertisements as they call them, then we will see how many people will still be interested to continue using these primitive, billionaire, imbecile, genius-run platforms such as Facebook or Twitter. So how can we pass these two acts? Obviously, writing letters to our senators and congressmen is not going to work. They can be persuaded to pass a raise for themselves or to redistribute some wealth, but not to jeopardize their own careers. In the capital of the free world, the United States, we need to elect at least 300 truly independent congressmen, at least 75 senators, and the president, for the sole purpose to pass these two acts. To average sheep, this sounds like lunacy. Apparently, to get one candidate elected for Senate, it takes millions of dollars and tremendous amount of effort. How much more for 300 congressmen, 100 senators, plus a president? Impossible. But if we stop thinking like sheep and use our own personal logic, we do not need to do what they've been doing on the establishment media circus, financed by money. We can publicize the entire movement as one entity